Priestly Reflections, a Dvar Torah for Parashat Tetzaveh. I remember the following scenario from my years in Yeshivah. My Chavruta and I are sitting in the midrash trying to understand a complicated piece in the Gemara. After a few hours of effort, we were able to put together a beautiful structure that met all the requirements of all the information we managed to gather so far. Any difficulties my friend had were beautifully deflected by yours truly. There was only one problem. The next line in the Gemara completely contradicted the premise on which we based our theory, and we had to start all over again. We felt frustrated, but in the end, I think that the fact that we didn't give up made us better than we would have been if we hadn't followed through with this frustrating experience. Which leads me to this week's Parasha. In the quick preliminary scan of the Parasha designed to see if there's any topic that appealed to me, I came across two interesting points regarding Shemen Hamishchah. The first, an argument between Ramban and Ibn Ezra regarding the anointment process of the Cohen Gadol. On the Psukim, ושמת המצנפת על ראשו ויצקת על ראשו ומשחת אותו, Ramban explains that the oil is poured on the Kohen while the מצנפת is on his head, as opposed to Ibn Ezra, who says it wasn't. And the second, Ramban's debate concerning Rashi's interpretation regarding the concept of anointing in the context of priestly garments on the word lמשחה, trying to discern whether the oil was poured on the garment as part of the anointment process or not. Here began an attempt to understand the anointment process when, at this stage, we identified, in a way that turned out to be slightly wrong, that the Klei Mishkan were anointed using the oil as well as the Kohanim and the Mishkan, but not the garments. These things were based on how we read numerous Psukim in 5 Parashiot. We then tried to build all sorts of theories around the fact that the garments aren't anointed on their own. We thought that maybe the vessels were relatively permanent and not perishable, this compared to the garments, which by their very nature change with the changing of the Kohanim. But given the fact that Kohanim themselves go through the anointment process, we decided to drop the idea. We then tried to argue that perhaps the role of the garments in the Mishkan was fundamentally different than the other kelim. If the kelim were used for direct worship, i.e. smoking, sacrificing, lighting, washing, or cleaning, the garments play an indirect role. They're worn by the worshipper, but they don't fulfill a specific worshiping function. Their job is to lechasot besareva, to keep things covered, and to honor and glorify lechavodu letifaret, but they don't actually do specific work. This concept started losing its validity with the verse that gave the choshen the role of the secretary, lezikaron lifnei Hashem tamid. The role of the bells on the me'il v'nishma kolo bevo'el HaKodesh also contributed in dismantling the above theory, but the idea was finally shelved when we reached the job of the tzitz, which is to rest on Aharon's forehead and atone for all Bnei Israel's sins. This led to the theory that the clothes make the priest, as stated by Chazal. While their clothes are upon them, their priesthood is upon them. When their clothes are not upon them, their priesthood is not upon them. That's why the Kohanim are anointed with their clothes on them, but not separately, and we were finally happy with the conclusion we reached. We summed things up, I taught them in shul, I started writing them down, and then I noticed a verse I missed earlier and stopped me in my footsteps. The Perek Kaftet Pasuk Kaf Aleph, right in the middle of the two verses which we began the article, is another verse discussing the garments. And you shall take from the blood and from the anointing oil, and sprinkle upon Aharon, and upon his garments, and upon his sons, and upon their garments. That is, there is a verse that refers directly to the use of the anointing oil on the garments. Now, it is true that I can probably find a way around it. I can say that the verse connects the priest to the garment, and I might be able to continue on this path I started. There might also be a difference between Meshicha and Hazaya. I might even find a way out of greater difficulties. But the words of Al Aharon and Al Begadav create a division and not a connection. And at this point, I prefer to describe the process and end with the words of Shemen Hamishchah, Keshem shekibalti sachar al adrisha, kach akabel sachar al הפרישה. Or in my words, sometimes you gotta know when to stop. If, like me, you also learned something this week, you're more than welcome to pass it on to a friend. Maybe they'll learn something too. As always, I am Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.